Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome back to another video. Now I tried hot foiling in the past and it was so much fun, and lots of different companies are coming out with hot foil products to coordinate along with their stuff. And I'm going to show some really fun ways to step up your cards with the hot foiling products. So without further ado, let's get into it. For all my projects, I'm using the Glimmer hot foil system from Spellbinders. There's also a machine for the Gemini Junior, but I have the Spellbinders Platinum machine, so this is what I'll be using throughout today's video, but both work well. Alright, so if you haven't used this machine before, you're going to want to turn it on right here, and then it's going to have this power on button, and once your platform is ready, this will turn green. So that's how you know this is going to be hot enough, and it definitely has heat coming off of it. Alright, so I'm starting off with the Gilded Rose hot foil plate, and all the hot foil plates that I'm using have products to coordinate along with, but I like to get my hot foiling done first so I can line everything up along with it. And I'm going to go in with it like this and kind of make it hang off the card a little bit. And when I go in, I like to have a piece of mint tape or low tack tape right at the top here, and then I can cut a piece of foil that's going to fit along this. Also, this is the Glimmer hot foil. It's meant to coordinate along with this. Your regular laminator foils and heat foils like that won't work. It has to be specifically for this machine because it gets hot enough. All right, so I'm going to take this foil and I'm going to lift up my plate. This is just how I like to do it with the tape to give a little hinge, and then I'll put my hot foil down there. You want to have the pretty side of the foil facing the pretty side of the hot foil plate, and then we will place it down, making sure that everything is tucked in there and is going to foil. And then to avoid overfoiling, I'm just going to go in here and quickly cut all the way around this hot foil plate too, and that's going to help so that nothing really transfers along the edge. All right, then once this says ready, I'm going to take the plate, and this is why I kind of taped it on so that everything stays in place like that. I'm going to grab the shim and the spacer pad then, place that on top, and then I'll turn on the timer, and this will turn solid and stop flashing once it's ready to go through the machine. All right, so this is ready. I'm going to carefully pull this out, and I'll bring it right back to my Platinum machine. You can either use the Platinum 6 or the regular Platinum, and I'm just going to slowly run it through. It's awkward die cutting, but this time it's hot foil edition. I'm going to lift off my two plates. This one got a little bit of foiling on it, but that's not going to affect anything. And then we'll lift this off. Now, because it's super hot, I'm just gonna grab this tool to pull it off of there. And I use the same tool to just kind of place it onto the cooling pad because that's going to be pretty hot. But then we can peel this off, and there we have that really beautiful rose design. And I always say, like, I love how the hot foil kind of makes it indented, and it's going to really hold up to the next couple techniques that we do. Now, sometimes we get a little bit of overfoiling. That's where the mono sand eraser comes in handy, and you don't need to be gentle on top of anything that's already foiled. Like, you don't really need to avoid anything. I just go in here with my mono sand eraser and go in and sand that off, and it's going to really come off nicely there and make it look like that never happened. But this is kind of just part of the process with hot foiling. Sometimes you get a little bit of overfoiling, and it's not too big of a deal because it's easy to clean off. To color in the rose, there is a Gilded Rose stencil layering set with it to color it in, which is awesome. I love these from Altenew, and there is 3 different stencils to go along with it. All right, so I'm bringing it in the station. It has the numbers right on here, and it's going to be pretty easy to line this up. All I need to do is kind of line the big bold edges up with the outside and then magnet it down. For this first layer, I'm going in with a really light color. Here, I'm just using a little bit of piggyback, and I'm going to go in and do a little blending around the edge. Also, I wanted to mention that you could do your foiling on any type of cardstock. I know a lot of people recommend using really smooth cardstock, but today I just stuck with using my Simon Hurley Create Stark White cardstock. Even though it might not be the best for foiling, I'm not really sure what is the best, but I wanted to make sure that I used that because it takes the ink the best, and it blends really well with the inks, and I knew I was going to do some coloring after, so that's what I decided to use. Alright, and then with the shading, I'm just going to leave the center a little bit lighter like that, because I like to add some natural shading, even though we are using that layering stencil. So moving on to the next layer, I love that all I need to do is lift off the magnets there, and then we can bring in our second stencil. Some of the edges are really easy to kind of tell exactly where to line it up. You want to just find some pretty obvious points there, and that should line up really easily then. All right, next I'm going into Prom Queen, and I'm switching over to blender brushes for these layers because they get more detailed, and I want to get into all of those different details. So I'm going to just go around the edge again, a little bit darker, and then I'll just lightly kind of blend over the center. It's going to reveal that beautiful second layer, so it really just does some awesome shading. All right, then this is the third layer and the fourth one up here. Again, you can kind of see where that point is going to line up with the image there, and then we can magnet this down. Here I'm using a little bit of Love Struck, which is a little bit of a deeper red. And I'm just going to go in here, again, around the edges I'm giving a little bit of darker, and I just love how these colors are really coming together to shade this rose in. All right, then last but not least, I'm gonna go in with this layer, and you can see this little point right here matches up with that point right there. So that's kind of how I'm gonna line this up. You wanna really find those like little areas where it's got a distinct point, and that's gonna help you, because otherwise it can be a little bit confusing or overwhelming. And then I'm going to go in with my last and darkest color, this Game Over, which is just going to be stunning on here. So I'm gonna go in and blend this in. All right, and when I lift that off, you can see that finishes off the rose really beautifully. And here we have that completed look. I absolutely love it, and you can see that foil really holds up nicely over all that ink blending, which is one of my favorite parts about this kind of hot foiling, because it then presses it in and stays super durable. All right, so I've cut this rose out, and to create a background for it, I'm going to go in with the Dotty Circles 3D embossing folder. I can just place my cardstock right into there and then run this right through my die cutting machine. This is just the folder with one plate on top, and it's gonna give me a beautiful embossed effect. All right, so when we pull this out of here, you can see that beautiful embossed background. It's nice and subtle, just that white on white, but I think it looks beautiful in the end. All right, so I finished it off with a sentiment from the Sparkle Bright stamp set that just says, "You sparkle," and there we have that finished card. I love how this background adds a little bit of texture without overwhelming it with color, and that really beautiful gilded rose just shines bright. All right, now I'm going back to Stencil 2, and there's still all this ink that we've got on here, and I like this one because it's got some detail in it, but you can still tell that it's that beautiful rose. I'm gonna go in with a little bit of water and just kind of spray this down a little bit, and then bring in a piece of my stark white cardstock so that I can go in and place this right down onto my card. And then I can go in with kind of a cleaner cloth and just start kind of dabbing all over here to really let that water kind of sink into the cardstock. And then once it's kind of sunken in, we can lift that off, and you've started to get some of that beautiful rose detail in there. I really love how this kind of starts to look. All right, then you'll see this little 3 etched in, and because we flipped it over for the watercolor, we can flip it over for this as well. All right, then I'll line that layer up, and this is a little bit more abstract, so it's not as crucial to really get it in the exact same spot, but again, find those certain points that really line up with the design, and then we can go in with our inks. Here I'm gonna start off with Prom Queen, since we did that lighter kind of Prom Queen wash there, so this color will layer onto there nicely, and we'll just go in and blend in this detail. This layer is going to blend into some of the white areas that are in there, and it's gonna start looking more like a rose now. And then we'll go in with this last layer, place this on top, and it lines up with the last layer we just did. And then we'll finish off the blending with a little bit of Love Struck as our last and darkest layer on there. So lift that off, and you guys can see this is where that really starts coming together. It looks a little bit more like a rose now. It's definitely still abstract, but I like that this is another way to use your layering stencils. And of course, if it filled in a little bit more, you would definitely see more of the rose effect. All right, so for this card, I added down a couple of little glue spots right around the sentiment where I wanted to add some gems. Because I added the sentiment down, "It's your time to sparkle." If you struggle with sequins, I like to leave them in little groupings like this and mix the sizes and kind of put them right around the sentiment to really grab the focal point together like that. I think that finishes it off nicely. All right, so that finishes off this card. I love that this is another way to use that layering stencil in a different way to give a little bit more abstract look. All right, so for the next one, we're using the Sparkle Bright hot foil plate. And like I said, sometimes they won't make sense because this just does the detail. But again, you want to do it first. The lineup is going to be great. So I've got a little bit of silver hot foil here laid down, and then I'm going to place my plate down right on top of it. And instead of doing the whole hinge thing, I'm just going to tape it down right like that once it's all lined up. And I'm gonna go in here and just cut a little bit of this off. It doesn't need to be perfect at all. Nobody's gonna see how it looked before it was foiled. And then I'm also gonna do a little bit over here so that doesn't get foiled either. All right, then take it plate side down here, place that down, and then put the 2 plates on top and start the timer. All right, once this is ready, we're going to pull it out here, bring it over to my machine. And I've kind of learned you just want to run it through once pretty slowly. I find if you run it back through, sometimes the plate can move and give you like a shifted look. So just once through really slowly so that everything transfers. This tool is honestly a game changer. I'm going to pull it off with this and then pull the hot foil plate right off onto my cooling mat. All right, so I can peel off my hot foil. Now only a little tiny bit overfoiled here. And again, you guys know what to do if that happens. You don't need to be gentle around what is actually foiled, and use your mono sand eraser. All right, that looks great. I'm excited to blend that one out too. All right, for this next foiling piece, I'm going to use the Sparkle Bright stamp set to fill everything in. I'm going to place this down in my Misty here, and I'm going to grab the first image, and this is that kind of detail layer. And then I'll ink this up with a little bit of black ink and stamp it right down over top of our foiling. All right, so I'm going to line this solid stamp up along with all of the leaves. And now that we have that black outline down, it's definitely a lot easier, but it doesn't have to be completely perfect. So I'm going to go in here, press that down. And then here we're gonna go in with a little bit of ink. I'm going in with some Overzealous to start off with to stamp down that solid color. And then next I can go in with a little bit of Fake Plant, and I'm gonna add a little bit of shading with my blending tool. So I'm just going to go in here and kind of dab on some of that darker color, which is going to allow me to get in and add some shading down. So I'll do this in layers. That's why I like the Misty stamping tool, because I'm able to go in on several layers and add that shading down a little bit at a time. And with these guys, we'll go in with some purples. So I'm starting off with a little bit of really light purple. This happens to be Sidewalk Chalk, and we'll go in and stamp that down. All right, so we'll line up the second layer then. This is that little bit of shading. And here I'm gonna go in with a little bit of Triple Berry, which is a nice warmer purple that's a little bit darker. Go in there and stamp that down. And if you want to make the color darker, just like we did with Sidewalk Chalk, you can go in with that same color several times. All right, there's also little centers to the flowers too. So last but not least, we'll go in with a little bit of Over the Moon and add those little centers right in with a little bit of this yellow color. All right, now after I'm done stamping, I can go in with a little rag to wipe my surface clean. And even after all that stamping, that foiling is still super shiny, which is why I love how resilient that hot foil is. All right, so I'll just line up the coordinating die, add a little bit of mint tape down to hold it in place, and then we'll run this right through our die cutting machine. All right, so I'm gonna use the Deco Diamond stencils next, but instead of using both of them, I'm actually just gonna use one. I tried making this background, and it seemed like a little bit too much for these flowers, but if you like that, you could totally do that awesome layering effect, which I thought was super cool. But I wanted to keep it a little bit more simple, so I'm grabbing one of these stencils, which you could totally use on its own. I think it's just a beautiful geometric background in itself. And then I'm gonna keep it a little bit simple and more elegant, using just the Sidewalk Chalk ink for a nice light purple background, using that same color scheme that we've already used on the flowers. And this is why I love blending brushes too, because I can keep the color as light as I want it. Here I'm going in with such a nice soft wash of this color and just blending it down with the blending brush all over my stencil. All right, so once I'm done with that, I can lift this off here. And there we have that beautiful purple background. And I think that's going to look really great with these flowers and not be as bold, but like I said, you could totally use both layers. All right, so for this, I just finished it off with a sentiment from the Flower Picking Friends stamp set for something small, and I love how it turned out. That background stencil is really beautiful, and the way that this just foils on those details on top, I think is just so stunning in the end. All right, this next one has this beautiful mandala and die that cuts it out too, which I think is awesome. It's called the Sunburst Doily, and we'll go in and foil this. All right, I'm going pretty basic and classy for these designs, but for this one, I'm also going to use a little bit of that gold. All right, then I've just placed it down, and the pretty side is touching the pretty side of the foil there. And then I'm not going to really tape anything down this time. I wanna see how well it does like this, because it doesn't need to be perfectly lined up since I'm die cutting it. So I'll just place that down onto the surface there, and then we'll put both plates on top. put our timer on. Slow and steady wins the race. Alright, lifting it off with this. I'm excited to see this one. And even with this one, where I didn't hold anything down with any tape, it still went really well, and it doesn't look like it shifted at all. It got a really nice clean foil there, and I'm not gonna worry too much about the outer foiling here because I'm die cutting it out. Alright, to do this mandala, I'm gonna go in with a couple different colors of my inks and start my blending. I'm starting off with a little bit of shooting star here to add a little bit of yellow in that center. I want this to kind of be like a little sunburst. To darken it up a little bit, I'll add some roar in, coming in from the sides. They're bringing a little bit of that darker tone in, and you can see just how well they're blending right in the center there. Then I'll bring in a little bit of Love Struck, and you guys can see as I do this, I just like to kind of turn the cardstock and get it at an angle where it's best for me to color it in, and just blend that color in. And I'm kind of bringing this one to here. I brought the orange out to here. So I'm following kind of points on the mandala on how to kind of shade this in. Last but not least, we'll bring in a little bit of Crown Me. This is one of my favorite color combinations altogether. I think it really brings the card together and is just a stunning blend of colors. All right, so this die leaves a little bit of a larger border. I'm gonna go in and line that up, and then I can tape it down with a little bit of my mint tape before we run it through our die cutting machine. All right, for this background, I'm gonna use the Dotty Circles embossing folder again, and I'm going to use the flatter side here and take a little bit of my Love Struck ink pad and just swipe it all along this surface to add some color into there. Then I'll just spray this down with a little bit of water to get it moving around. Then I'll place my piece of stark white cardstock right on the opposite side here, and without anything moving, I'm going to place this side down right on top and then run this through my die cutting machine. All right, so then I'm going to lift this up here, and that really pushed that ink around quite a bit. So it didn't leave the dots fully white, it just gave this kind of cool watercolor background, but honestly, I love how this turned out, so I'm gonna keep it just like this. All right, then if you want to make this a little bit more dimensional, you can actually take your ink pad and just go right on top of the surface here. And I'm just going to really lightly rub this across the surface, and that's going to make those dots a little bit darker. So you can either do it with the embossing to make it lighter, or do it afterwards with the ink pad to make these dots a little bit darker. All right, that finishes off this last card here. I love how shiny this mandala is, and that really beautiful ink blending that we did on it really makes it stand out on the card, and this fun embossed background just finishes it off so beautifully. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed seeing those cards and the fun hot foil tips along with it. I thought the coordinating products were so much fun. Leave a comment down below on which card was your favorite from today's video. Give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button down below so you never miss another one like this. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon. Bye!